Welcome to Trekkie Tuesdays. This episode was called A Piece of the Action, and it involved the entire Star Trek theme, but converted into like some sort of mobsters 1920s situation where people are killing each other with what's called a heater, aka a gun of some sort, and dealing in some sort of illegal business for unknown reasons. It's unclear what that illegal business is, but somehow making money. The premise here is that at one point Starfleet or some group in the Federation left behind a book that was talking about 1920s mobsters. And this was something that tainted the society, and they began to sort of worship that and view it as the way. And so they all became mobsters, which is an interesting idea. I mean, I feel like that particular concept, I don't think was exactly well executed from like a realist point of view. Like I don't think that would actually happen, but I think the idea that you could leave something seemingly harmless, like a book, behind, and then sort of have a whole society build around it, because it's from the future, it's from space, and you don't really understand space yet, is totally really neat to think about, right? Like, what if the Bible or something was left behind from aliens or something, and that's the basis for everything? I mean, I don't think that's the case, but it would be kind of interesting.
And the Bible kind of was left behind by aliens. It was left behind by probably very strange people in a very strange era, and it comes from a culture that is not ours, and that,
like, metaphorically. This week's episode was called The Gamester. No, it's sort of confusing, like how Noah and the flood sort of relate here, but you can design a society where it does, or you can express it metaphorically. That was what was sort of missing from this episode, is they didn't read anything as metaphor. They just took it all quite literally, and somehow were able to adopt these sort of cartoonish accents as a result, which I don't know how you would be able to do that from a book. I think it was mostly an excuse just to have Kirk kind of act silly and potentially make fun of Italian people. Like, I wasn't super clear, like, how offensive this episode was. I don't know how we, like, I think maybe some people are going to take big offense to it, and some people will be like, whatever. It was mostly just cheesy, I think.
Yes.
I don't remember anything, like, really horrible happening too much.
The women don't speak, they just kind of make wah-wah noise as they move.
Right.
But they were parodying
like,
that.
Yeah, it wasn't, I mean, whatever. I can deal with a little bit of that. It's the fact that it happens in every episode is a little weird, but whatever.
So there's the gangsters of Triskelion.
I mean, I think it was really funny to see Spock try to act casual and nonchalant and sort of lie. It's always funny watching Spock lie, because he always manages to not lie, but be misleading, and there's something just really endearing about that. And, to Shatner's credit, it's kind of funny to watch him sort of pretend to remove the sort of absurd entitlement that he always carries around as the captain, to become just one of the guys. I'm the boss, and the Federation's coming in, and whatever, and all this ridiculousness. I find he actually is able to do that, like, bizarre, over-the-top character sometimes better than this one. Maybe it's just because he like is bored of being the captain by this point, and is excited to do something different. It seems to come through. He seems more charged in this episode.
Yes. Welcome to Trekkie Tuesdays. This week's episode is a Pizza the Action.
I actually think later Shatner reminds me more of this episode. Like, you see it a little bit more of this sort of goofy character. Not, because in most of Star Trek, I think we're supposed to really admire him and think he's just this great hero. But he doesn't sell it. Like, I'm not sold on that. Like, one, because of his actions, but two, he just doesn't seem that deep about it, But as somebody who's playing more of like a casual, kind of for laughs character, I think he does a little bit better.
I agree with what Sarah said. I think the show is an interesting commentary on our cyclical fascination with gangsters. There's a whole theory about how we have a cycle every few years with which kind of daring, not accepted by society subgroup we become fascinated by. So we're currently in gangster phase right now, I think, with Boardwalk Empire, and before that we were in advertising executive phase, and before that pirate phase. I don't know where vampires fit into that, but it does seem to be cyclical, with each one sort of being a reaction against the weaknesses of the previous one, as escapist fantasy. And I think Star Trek does a decent job of deconstructing the gangster romanticization by imagining it as a whole world where there is explicitly no government. They're not committing crimes because there are no laws. They are the government. They just haven't realized that yet. And they're insisting on following the book. Kind of a metaphor for like a game theoretic trap where nobody can be the first to unilaterally disarm, and it's just shown to be incredibly wasteful and petty, and you limit yourself by being a gangster. I think in Star Trek universe you limit yourself by being anything other than like a science fiction fan or something. And Kirk has to jump in and somehow manipulate within the structure of gangster world. He has to start reforming the society into the only kind of society that the Federation or that he recognizes as legitimate, which is one as a centrally controlled one that is moving slowly and steadily in the direction of greater and greater technological prowess. Instead of being frozen like this, they explicitly compare this book to the Bible, and I do think it can be read as a subtle but razor-sharp dig at people who, sorry for the harshness of this phrasing, people who take the Bible seriously. People who take it as a Bible, anyway. You shouldn't take anything as a Bible, in my humble opinion.
But I don't think anybody can fully... I think the reason they're able to get away with this is because, very few people on Earth, take the Bible. So, even fundamentalists don't adhere to every single
Yeah, it's not
thing.
possible.
Right. You know what I mean? I think even fundamentalists will say, oh yes, there's metaphor here, and imagery or whatever, they'll use some other word maybe besides metaphor, but and it's clear here that there's no symbolic, it's not like they're holding guns that actually just shoot bubbles or something, right? They're literally killing people for basically no reason. If they were to go into that metaphor territory and make it less cheesy, maybe it wouldn't have been aired because like it would have been too obvious what they were sort of digging at.
It is mostly, I think, just a farce with extended comedy, with the revelation that, of course, Kirk can't drive a car. It's a little on the nose and goes on a little too long. But watching Kirk and Spock trying to talk gangster and getting gradually better and better at it, that's a treat.
It sounded like you said a pizza reaction.
It's mostly a treat seeing how much fun Shatner is having with the whole idea. It's also just fun. I wish they'd followed up. As far as I know, they never follow up with the sequel hook at the end, where it's implied that the people who were imitating gangsters are now going to be imitating the Federation. It would be fun to see the Feds subjected to the kind of cultural imperialism that they're subjecting everybody else to, or that Kirk is anyway, while claiming to adhere to a principle of non-interference. But I guess that's kind of what a part of what the godlike aliens we meet are about. It's they're federationing the Federation.
That is interesting, though, that the Federation never seems to be too concerned with learning too much too quickly. It's weird because they sort of really prescribe to this notion that there's like very linear progress in technology and social welfare and everything else. Like societies always move forward. There's just one step, then the next step, the next step, and you don't want to give someone a communications device because then they're going to jump ahead 10 steps before they're ready or something. But the Federation's goal is to seek out new life and new civilizations and like presumably new technology and like new concepts, and like they don't they like log everything and they don't worry about getting infected with like too much knowledge or something. Which I don't know if they just feel like, well, once you've reached a certain point of nirvana, then, anything after that is just gravy, or if it's like, they just are like, we'll do it, fine. I have a feeling they don't really care. Like, I think they just haven't really thought this worldview out fully, which, like, it does make me like this episode a little bit more because it is sort of dealing more with that practical of like, okay, but if you were actually gonna engage with aliens, like what would you be worried about? Like, and I think the idea that you would accidentally leave something behind or have a miscommunication that like sets off a series of events that like leaves that civilization in a worse place than when you found it is like totally legit, and like the idea that they don't go in the reverse is like sort of weird to me. But I guess I don't know. I don't really prescribe to a linear view of progress, and like I would not be surprised if like some aliens are like, if they're out there are like really advanced in one category, like possibly categories that we haven't thought of, and then like, but like on other levels are not at all. Like even with like animals on this planet, you see that, right? Where like some creatures like can't like move things, but like can communicate like, like in ways that we can't, and like do cool things like that. Like I don't know, like elephants and dolphins and stuff do cool things, and but they'll never be humans, right? But maybe we could learn something from them.
That was a piece of the action. Tune in next week for the immunity syndrome. I did say that.
Is that really what it's called?
No.
Oh. Wait, what is this episode called? This episode is called A Piece of the Action, right?